Good morning, everyone. Merci, Laura, pour l'introduction. It's great to be here at the world's largest mining conference held right here in my home of Toronto. Ladies and gentlemen, I start most of my speeches similarly because I've always been someone who cuts to the chase. There's an obvious elephant in the room these days. We are at a hinge moment in Canadian history. Everything from our economy, to our sovereignty, to our climate, dare I say, to our democracy, is being tested. In fact, the whole world is experiencing what our Prime Minister so aptly called a rupture in the world order. Let me repeat that. We are facing a rupture in the world order. The illusion of stable, rules-based global order is not fading. It has been shattered. We've been launched into a harsh environment where geopolitical competition is intensifying and major powers feel few, if any, constraints on their actions. The strong want to do what they can and force the weak to suffer what they must. Supply chains are being rewired. Strategic competition is intensifying. Capital is being repriced. And critical minerals, once treated as background inputs, are now central to global power, to economics, to national defense, and the race to net zero. At the same time, critical mineral supply chains are being weaponized. Ladies and gentlemen, a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. And as the Prime Minister made clear in Davos, it would be a mistake to count a middle power like Canada as just a passive bystander. Instead, we are leading a strong response, driven by principled pragmatism, and other countries are following suit. I start my remarks here today not because I think it's something that those in the room do not understand, but because there is perhaps no sector where this moment matters more than in metals and mining. But before we speak about strategy and capital, we should remember something fundamental. Our country, Canada, was built by miners. Long before we had critical mineral lists and industrial strategies, Canadian prospectors were exploring the Canadian Shield with little more than crude maps and resolve. They were flying bush planes into the Yukon and northern Quebec before airstrips existed. They began drilling through bedrock in Sudbury, in Thompson, in Labrador City, and in Flin Flon, in temperatures that would stop most operations cold. They staked claims in places that were not yet named on maps. They built towns where there was nothing but forest and tundra. They ran railways across some of the harshest terrain on the planet. And they strung power lines through the wilderness. They financed projects others called impossible to build. They did not wait for someone else to provide the resources that the world needed. Against all odds, Canada delivered. Gold discoveries in the Yukon and the Red Lake helped build the North. Canadian nickel powered industrialization of North America. In World War II, International Nickel and its employees in Sudbury and Port Colborne supplied 95% of all the Allied demands for nickel. Uranium from Saskatchewan helped define a new nuclear era for the world. Potash from the prairies improved crop yields all over the world. That daring and determination is what made Canada a world-class mining nation. And ladies and gentlemen, under this government, we are deliberately bringing back that spirit. We are building again and moving to get our resources from mine to market at a pace Canada has not seen in generations. This is a new era for Canadian mining, one where our resources once again sit at the nexus of our economic security, our sovereignty, and our global influence. This morning, I would like to do three things. First, I would like to lay out the investment case for Canada. Second, I will explain how our government is advancing mineral development at home and working with allies abroad under three pillars: economy, security, and sustainability. And third, I will announce a major set of deals under the Critical Minerals Production Alliance, mobilizing capital at scale and reinforcing Canada's role as a reliable partner and the anchor of allied supply chains. Today, Canada produces 60 minerals and metals at approximately 200 mines from coast to coast to coast. We are the world's leading producer of potash, second in uranium, third in palladium, and a top 5 producer of 11 other critical minerals. In 2024, this sector supported 724,000 jobs in this country. It contributed $156 billion to our GDP, representing 5% of Canada's total economy. Mineral exports from Canada reached 200 countries, accounting for 21% of our national exports. Canada attracts 20% of the global exploration spending, and the TSX and TSX Venture account for 46% of the global mining capital raised last year. Canadian headquartered companies account for 38% of global non-ferrous exploration budgets. As someone who has spent decades in capital markets, let me frame this clearly. Canada's investment proposition has never been stronger. We offer world-class geology, deep, liquid public capital markets, stable regulatory institutions, strong environmental standards and Indigenous partnerships, as well as political continuity. Few jurisdictions in the world can offer this mix. In portfolio terms, that combination lowers risk. It enhances project bankability, it improves project IRRs, NPVs, and payback periods. Our government has promised to build Canada into the strongest economy in the G7. Mining is fundamental to that objective. The sector invested $22 billion in construction and capital equipment in 2024, representing 6% of non-residential capital invested in this country. That investment creates jobs. It builds infrastructure. It builds roads, transmission lines, ports, and processing facilities that support long-term productivity and economic growth for this country. Ladies and gentlemen, through the Major Projects Office, we are catalyzing more investment and changing how nation-building mining projects move forward. Projects such as the Foran-McIlvenna Bay Mine, the Red Chris Copper Mine expansion, Nouveau Graphite, and the Sisson Tungsten Project have been referred for coordinated federal decision-making as part of a package of projects worth $116 billion. For investors, this new approach means clarity and predictability. We are also improving our entire permitting regime writ large, with the urgency that is both long overdue and this specific moment requires. We have asked the Major Projects Office to not only streamline permitting for projects referred to the office, but to collect best practices to be applied across the federal system. Tomorrow, I will be formally launching a tool on NRCan's website that will help mining proponents from Canada and abroad navigate Canadian permitting by providing a clear roadmap for federal permits and approvals, project-specific guidance and legislative requirements, and connecting users to key contacts at the right federal agencies. Finally, and perhaps most significantly, since the election, we have signed or advanced towards one project, one review agreements with Alberta, with Manitoba, with Ontario, with New Brunswick, with Nova Scotia, and with PEI, all in addition to the original agreement we signed with British Columbia. This is how we are getting our country building again, alongside Canadian workers and international partners. Our budget 2025 reinforced this approach with our Critical Minerals Sovereign Fund to support strategic projects, a $2 billion fund, a $1.5 billion first and last mile fund to close infrastructure gaps and enhance project economics, as well as expanded tax credits, both the Critical Minerals Exploration Tax Credit and the Clean Technology Manufacturing Tax Credit, which now cover 12 additional minerals. We've also introduced a productivity superdeduction that includes an accelerated investment incentive of up to 100% on certain mining depreciable properties. I also want to highlight that mining is central to economic reconciliation with our Indigenous peoples. Today, more than 17,300 Indigenous Canadians work in the metals and mining sector, representing 11% of our mining labor force. Industry and governments are working with Indigenous partners to grow Indigenous equity participation, driving prosperity for today and for future generations. This is industrial policy designed to crowd in capital and accelerate growth. This is why allies and industries around the world are investing in Canada. In fact, within the first year of our mandate, this government has attracted the greatest international investment in Canada that the country has seen in the past 2 decades. Globally, Canada is again a mining and minerals powerhouse. Canadian-based firms hold $353 billion in global mining assets across 95 countries. In trade negotiations and supply chain realignment, our resources matter. Our critical minerals are cards in our hands, giving us an advantage as we engage, as the Prime Minister says, in the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. Moreover, as we all know, critical minerals also underpin defense systems and technologies, advanced computing, telecommunications, and clean technologies, to name just a few applications. Mining in the north also reinforces our Arctic sovereignty and long-term strategic presence, major priorities for this government. To put it simply, our critical minerals are crucial to our security, to our sovereignty, and to our national defense. It also means that for Canada and our allies, over-reliance on concentrated foreign supply chains creates vulnerabilities that we will not live with any longer. Canada offers an alternative to that vulnerability for our allies. Instead of reliance on hegemons, investing in Canada offers diverse, low-carbon, rule of law-based production. And ladies and gentlemen, Canada will never use our resources as a coercive tool. Instead, we see them as tools to build a stronger G7, a stronger NATO, and a more secure world for all our allies. That is why during our 2025 G7 presidency, we launched the Critical Minerals Production Alliance to coordinate investment amongst trusted partners and make sure that minerals we need for security are secure themselves. And we are pleased to see that France, as the 2026 G7 president, is advancing the work started under the Production Alliance and ensuring that critical minerals remain on the G7 agenda. We are focused on reducing exposure to concentrated supply chains and ensuring that materials underpinning modern economies remain secure, sustainable, and accessible. Finally, Canada's mining leadership is also climate leadership. We are the world's second largest uranium producer, providing the mineral that makes clean, zero-carbon baseload nuclear power possible. We are a top 5 producer of key battery minerals including nickel and cobalt, which underpin the transition to net zero emission transportation in line with Canada's new automotive strategy. We are proud that Canadian minerals are produced under strong environmental and labor standards in partnership with Indigenous peoples who know and care for the land with traditional knowledge and expertise. Using Canadian minerals rather than those produced elsewhere reduces global emissions by displacing higher emitting alternatives elsewhere. This is not only Canada protecting our environment, but it's our strategy to implement a long-term competitiveness strategy in a world where capital markets will increasingly price in sustainability risk. Now I want to move to the moment we've all been waiting for, the second round of deals under the G7 Critical Mineral Production Alliance. Last year, Prime Minister Carney launched the Critical Minerals Production Alliance as one of our flagship initiatives under Canada's G7 presidency. After years of talking about banding together with allies to do something like this, the alliance was designed to push shared ambition into coordinated action. With 26 deals announced last fall at the G7 Energy and Environmental Ministerial, I would say it has been a success so far. But today, we are scaling that success with 30 new partnerships across 10 allied countries, the EU, and the UN. These deals unlock an additional $12.1 billion in critical minerals capital investment from coast to coast to coast. Altogether, this means the Production Alliance has catalyzed $18.5 billion in Canadian mining projects. No small feat in 6 months. These deals represent aligned equity participations, offtake agreements, and coordinated policy measures that accelerate projects and de-risk cross-border investments. In capital markets terms, this reduces execution risk. It enhances supply chain certainty and improves long-term project returns. It is how we move from delay in the past to delivery today and tomorrow. In geopolitical terms, it diversifies allied supply chains and reduces exposure to hegemons who seek to control us. Our partners have chosen to move forward with Canada because Canada offers predictability, integrity, and scale. This is momentum. This is proof of concept. And this is capital mobilized at scale. I want to be clear to my fellow Canadians and all of our international friends. Canada intends to be the best place in the world to invest in mining, processing, and partnerships. We combine extraordinary natural resources with world-class institutions, capital markets, and talent, and we are going to put that to work for Canadian families, Canadian businesses, and our friends and allies around the world. To investors here this morning, the message is clear. If you want scale, stability, and long-term strategic advantage in one jurisdiction, invest in Canada. Not just because we have the geology, but because we have the resolve to make the most of it and bring prosperity, security, and sustainability to Canadians and our allies. Now I invite you all to join us for the signing ceremony of today's deals, an exciting moment for Canada and for all of our partners around the world. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.